The wind shrieked like a curse over the empty plains, ripping through the bare trees and rattling the bones of the dying winter. Snow fell in slow, drifting sheets, not soft but sharp, like powdered glass. It stung her cheeks where the skin had split, bled, and gone numb. She didn't cry anymore. Hannah Warner had passed through crying, passed through begging, passed through shame. Now she just breathed, or tried to. Her wrists, wrapped in rawhide, were lashed to a gnarled cottonwood tree already half dead from frost. The bark bit into her spine. Her arms had long since gone numb, and her legs had crumpled beneath her, so she hung, half kneeling in the snow, dress frozen stiff, bonnet torn, eyes glazed. A woman in mourning, tied to a tree like a wild animal. Not far off, two small shapes sat bundled beneath a dirty wool blanket. Her children, twins, curled together, crying until their voices had frayed into hiccuping gasps. Miriam clutched a cracked porcelain doll. Eli gnawed at a piece of frozen bread he couldn't chew. Every few minutes, the boy would crawl toward her, whimpering, only to be yanked back by the cold and the rope she was tethered with. She couldn't reach them, couldn't warm them, couldn't do anything but whisper their names. Mama's here. Still here. No one heard her. No one came. They'd left at dawn, the settlers, Amos, her late husband's brother, and 5 others, after hammering a sign to the tree above her head. Which? That word burned hotter than the wind. She brought ruin on her man. Amos had told them all in the church. Cursed womb. Temptress lips. And now she claims her babes are his. He spat. They ain't Warners. They're bastards. She should be chained for what she did to his soul. No one stopped him. Not Reverend Carlyle, not the wives who once took tea in her parlor. Not even her sister-in-law, who had once sewn bonnets for the twins. The prairie was cold, but people were colder. She remembered the slam of the church door. The way her babies had cried when the rope was pulled. Her daughter screaming, "Mama," and Amos calling her filth. Now, the storm had swallowed them all. And the only thing louder than the wind was silence. It was mid-afternoon, though the sun never really showed. Just a pale glow behind a thick ceiling of gray. The snow was deep now, up to her calves, and still falling. Her fingers had gone waxy. Her lips cracked. Her breath steamed only faintly. Eli stirred. He looked up at her through red-rimmed eyes. "Ma." Her mouth moved, but no sound came. Then came the hoofbeat. 1. Then 3. Then silence. Hannah didn't lift her head. She couldn't. But her heartbeat surged like a frightened colt. Her head spun. Hallucinations came before death, she knew. Her mother had said that, when they buried her father. But it wasn't a hallucination. It was a horse. A tall figure, cloaked in buffalo hide, emerged through the curtain of snow, riding slowly. The horse was lean, black, nostrils flaring steam. The rider wore no settler's coat, no blue badge. His hair was long, black, braided with bone. A rifle slung across his back. A hunting knife at his waist. Comanche. The settlers would call him savage. But Hannah only saw a man who wasn't leaving. A shadow that didn't disappear. He halted 10 feet away, dismounted silently, and walked toward her with the slow caution of a hunter unsure of what trap lay ahead. He looked first at her, then at the children, then back at her. She tried to speak. What came out was a wheeze. The man stepped closer. Hannah's knees buckled further. The last strength in her spine gave out, and her cheek hit the bark. Then, hands. Strong. Warm. She flinched, expecting pain. But the knife came not to cut her flesh, but the rawhide. The cord snapped, and her arms collapsed limply. She sagged forward, into him. His chest was warm. The buffalo hide smelled of smoke and wild sage. His hand steadied her back. Her body shook violently, no longer able to hold in the tremors. He said something low and unfamiliar, a string of words that sounded like river water over rocks. He repeated it. She opened her mouth, trying to answer. But only a cough came. He looked at her again, studying her with something close to confusion. He touched her face, gently, then turned his head sharply toward the children, still curled near the tree. He moved fast then, lifting her in one arm like driftwood, crossing the snow toward them. The children screamed, terrified, but then clung to her skirts as he knelt and wrapped them all in his buffalo cloak. She thought she would faint. She wanted to. Her body was too tired, her soul too frayed. But the children needed her awake. She locked eyes with Miriam, who was sobbing now into her side. "Mama," the girl whispered, "don't go sleepin' again." The man said something again, softer this time. He gently laid Hannah across the saddle and placed both children before her, holding them tight. Then he mounted behind them, wrapped his arms around all three, and kicked the horse forward. She didn't know where they were going. Didn't know if this was rescue or new captivity. She just knew the snow no longer clawed at her face, and her children no longer shivered alone. And that, for the first time in 2 days, her body leaned on something warm. They rode for what felt like hours, through hills blanketed in white, past frozen streams and quiet groves. Hannah faded in and out of consciousness. Each time she stirred, she heard the steady sound of hoofbeats and the children's soft breathing pressed to her chest. When the world sharpened again, they had arrived. A camp. Teepees ringed a central fire, flickering against the darkening sky. Smoke rose from the tops. Figures moved through the haze, some men, some women, some children. They looked up as he rode in, and murmurs broke out. Hannah couldn't understand them, but she didn't hear fear. Only surprise. The rider dismounted and caught her as she slid. She felt herself lifted again, like a doll in a dream. A woman appeared, older, with braids wrapped in red cloth. Her eyes were sharp, and she barked something at him. He answered quickly. The older woman glanced at Hannah, then stepped forward, lifted her chin, examined her frostbitten lips and cracked skin. Her expression softened. She beckoned, and he followed. They brought her into a teepee warmed by a fire pit. Furs lined the ground. The air smelled of pine smoke and something herbal. She was laid gently on the furs, and the children placed beside her. Then the old woman went to work. Warm cloths. Salve on the wrists. A thick tea pressed to her lips. She flinched at first, but the woman hushed her, whispered things that sounded like lullabies even in a strange tongue. The man, the rider, stood near the door flap, silent. Watching. He hadn't said his name. He hadn't asked hers. But she watched him. He had saved her. Her and the twins. Her fingers trembled as she reached for her daughter. Miriam, still wrapped in his cloak, nestled beside her like a kitten and finally, slept. Eli curled into the crook of her legs. The fire crackled. Outside, the snow began to fall slower, softer. And somewhere far off, the wind no longer howled like death. It sighed. The fire crackled low in the center of the lodge, its orange light dancing across hide walls stitched with care. Smoke curled upward through a hole at the top, disappearing into the dark beyond. Hannah sat against the furs, her legs wrapped beneath a thick buffalo robe, her fingers still bandaged but warmer now, no longer blue. Her children slept beside her, Eli with a strip of rawhide clutched in his little fist, and Miriam curled around the half-mended doll the older woman had silently repaired. The heat of the fire kissed her cheeks. She hadn't felt her skin in days. Across from her sat the man who had saved them. He hadn't said his name, not in English, not in words she could hold on to. The others in the camp called him something that sounded like Tokeoma. It came with respect, and sometimes worry. She watched him now, bare-armed despite the cold, sharpening a flint knife with quiet, rhythmic strokes. The shadows made his cheekbones sharper, his eyes darker. He hadn't looked directly at her since bringing her here. But he had been watching, always, from the edge. Hannah's voice rasped when she finally broke the silence. "You saved us." He didn't look up. Was cold. Would have died. He paused, then nodded once. Yes. She waited. The silence stretched. "I'm Hannah," she added softly. "Hannah Warner." He said nothing, just went back to sharpening. She could have cried again, but tears took energy. Instead, she stared at the fire, eyes tracing the flickering shapes. Her body was healing, but her inside still felt hollow, scraped raw. The door flap rustled. The older woman entered again, carrying a bowl of steaming broth. She handed it to Hannah without a word, then sat beside her and began rubbing an herbal salve into the girl's feet. Miriam stirred, whimpered, then settled again. Hannah watched, her heart cracking at the tenderness. The woman, old, stone-faced, but gentle, looked at Hannah, then gestured, 2 fingers touching her own chest. Hannah mirrored the motion. "Hannah," she said again. The woman's eyes narrowed in thought. Then she tapped her own chest and said, "Nahi, Nahi," a name like dusk wind. Then she looked at the man, still sharpening, and grunted something. He replied in Comanche, low and short. "Tacoma," Nahi said to Hannah. Hannah's throat caught. "Tacoma," she repeated. He didn't smile, but the blade slowed. For the first time, she felt seen. By the 3rd day, Hannah could walk without falling. Tacoma watched from a distance as she stepped barefoot onto the snowy edge of the camp, letting the air bite her skin. She needed to feel it. Needed to be reminded she was still in her body, still here. The twins followed close, Miriam's tiny hand curled in hers. Some of the Comanche children watched, wide-eyed. Others whispered behind their mothers. She understood none of it, but the tone wasn't cruel, just curious. She didn't blame them. She was the white woman who arrived half dead, dragging her children behind her. The one who screamed in her sleep and flinched at raised voices. The one with bruises that hadn't yet faded. Tacoma approached that evening with a bowl of dried berries and strips of smoked meat. He set it beside her and turned to leave. She caught his sleeve. "I need to do something." He turned back, one brow raised. "I can't just sit here like I'm broken. You heal. I'm not a deer with a broken leg." A pause. "You speak too fast," he said dry. It startled a laugh from her. A weak, cracked thing, but a laugh. He tilted his head slightly, almost like approval. "Come," he said, motioning. She followed. The next hour, Hannah learned how to strip bark from trees without ruining the inner flesh, how to chew it into pulp to line wounds, how to gather dried moss from beneath stones without alerting snakes. Tacoma said little. When he did, it was often single words. "Careful. No. Good." But she watched him move, fluid and sure, and for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid of a man's silence. They returned to camp as snow began to fall again, fat flakes that clung to hair and lashes like sugar. Eli ran to her, arms wide. "Mama, that lady gave me jerky." Miriam tugged her arm. "We get to sleep by the fire again?" "Yes, sweethearts," she said, kneeling, pulling them both close. "We do." Tacoma paused at the edge of the teepee, watching. His eyes weren't cold, but they weren't soft either. Just unreadable. But he stayed a moment longer before disappearing into the snow. Over the next week, things shifted. Nahi taught her to mix herbs into poultices that stopped bleeding, to grind tree roots into bitter tea for bellyaches. Miriam helped sort dried berries by color. Eli learned to chase chickens through the edge of camp, though he never caught one. The tribe stopped staring so much. One woman even handed her a carved bone needle and some leather scraps, motioning for her to try. Hannah stitched clumsily at first, but her hands remembered the old rhythms. Her mother had taught her sewing before she was even old enough to read scripture. Each stitch made her feel more like herself. She didn't know who that self was anymore, but it felt closer. Tacoma remained mostly silent. He trained often, sparred with younger men, taught a boy, his brother, maybe, how to hunt rabbits with a bow. He was swift, clean, lethal. But when he returned to camp and saw Hannah, something shifted in his shoulders. His eyes held her a second longer. One night, as the stars burned low and the twins slept, he sat by the fire and said, "Your people come back?" She stiffened. "You mean the ones who chained me?" He nodded once. She stared into the flames. "If they think I lived, maybe." He was quiet. They won't stop, she added. Men like that, they think women are only good if we stay small. He glanced at the children. Small ones cry less now. She smiled. Because they feel safe. His brow furrowed. I do not like them scared. You don't like you scared either. He didn't answer. A day later, the first sign of trouble came. A rider was spotted near the riverbank. Not Comanche. Not friendly. A settler scout. Whispers passed quickly. The men gathered. Nahi's voice rose with warning. Tacoma returned to camp at dusk, his clothes dusted with ice. He knelt before Nahi, said something too fast for Hannah to follow. Nahi's face hardened. He turned to Hannah. More will come. She swallowed. You sure? He nodded. Scout does not ride alone. She touched her children's heads. Then we run. Tacoma shook his head. Not yet. He looked at her, eyes dark. They do not get you again. Her throat tightened. Why? He blinked. You are fire. I'm broken. No, he said, firm. You burn. The silence between them pulsed. Something alive. Something unspoken. That night, Tacoma handed her a blade. Short. Bone-handled. Clean. For when they come, he said. Hannah stared at it. I've never. You live now. They come, you live again. She turned it in her hands. It felt real, solid, powerful. She placed it under her bedding, beside her children. When she looked up, he was already gone. The next dawn, the snow melted slightly. The sky was pale. The quiet felt like the hour before a scream. And then, footsteps. The kind that weren't welcome. A shout from the trees. Horses. The jingle of settler reins. And a voice she'd prayed to forget. Bring the witch out. Amos. He was here. Hannah froze. She could hear Eli start to cry. Miriam clung to her leg. Tacoma stood at the edge of the fire circle, bow in hand. Another voice rang out. You got one chance to give her up. The Comanche men stood tense. Nahi shouted something sharp. A younger warrior lifted a tomahawk. Tacoma didn't move. Then Amos again. You hear me, redskins? That woman's ours. She belongs to the Lord's justice. Hannah stepped forward. She didn't shake. She didn't flinch. She stepped to Tacoma's side, shoulders square, chin lifted. Tell him, she said, voice low. Tacoma turned to her. What? Tell him I'm not his to claim. Not now. Not ever. Tacoma's lips curved into something close to a smile. Then he shouted, loud, fierce, in Comanche. The settlers didn't understand, but they understood the sound of bows being drawn. The hiss of war. The posse hesitated. Then Amos snarled. You'll burn for this, Hannah. You and those heathen bastards too. He turned. The posse backed away, but the promise in his words lingered like smoke. That night, Tacoma didn't speak. He sat beside the fire, whittling something with quiet focus. Hannah sat across from him, blade tucked under her belt. The twins were asleep. The danger hadn't passed, but they had passed through danger. Together. She leaned forward, voice soft. Why did you save me? He didn't look up. I saw a tree. I saw children. I could not ride away. That simple. He finally looked at her. You were dying, but you did not cry. No, she said. I burned. He nodded once. Yes. Fire. A long silence. Then she whispered, And you? He didn't answer, but he handed her what he'd carved, a small wooden horse. Eli would love it. Hannah smiled. The fire crackled, and somewhere beyond the trees, snow began to fall again. Softer this time. But inside the lodge, the fire did not go out. It wouldn't. Not this time. The sun hadn't risen yet, but the land glowed with that pale blue just before dawn, when everything looks frozen in time, like a painting left outside too long. Hannah stood on the edge of the camp, staring at the horizon. Her hands were steady now. Her breath didn't rattle in her chest. Behind her, the lodge smoked softly, children still asleep inside. Tacoma stood near the horses, adjusting a saddle, quiet as ever. They hadn't spoken since Amos rode off. Not because there was nothing to say, but because the air between them held too much already. When she turned to him, he was already looking. "He'll come back," she said, voice low. Tacoma nodded. "With others." "How many?" He ran a hand down the horse's neck. "Enough to make the ground bleed." She swallowed. "So we run." "No," he said. "We move." She frowned. "Isn't that the same?" "No," his eyes found hers. "Running is afraid. Moving is surviving." It was a subtle difference, but it mattered. By mid-morning, the camp stirred like a slow heartbeat. Women packed hides and bone tools into woven satchels. Men checked arrows, oiling blades, and fitting straps. Children whispered among themselves, sensing the shift even if they didn't understand it. Hannah helped where she could. Her hands tied knots now, sewed fast, carried packs. She didn't feel like a guest anymore. She felt like a woman who'd survived the kind of storm no one sees on a map. They left before noon. The tribe moved in loose formation, like a school of fish trained by the land. No shouting, no panic, just motion. Tacoma rode ahead, bow slung over his back, scanning the tree-line. Hannah rode with the children tucked close against her sides on a painted pony guided by an elder. Her fingers gripped the reins tight, not from fear, but from readiness. The sky hung heavy with clouds, threatening snow again. The wind had teeth, but it didn't bite as deep as it used to. By sunset, they reached the first cliffs. Red stone jutted from the earth like the spine of a buried god, winding into narrow canyons and echoing caves. It was land that remembered stories, land shaped by blood and time. They made camp deep in the canyon's throat, where even firelight would struggle to reach the top. Hannah sat beside Tacoma on a ridge just high enough to watch the camp breathe. "I used to think the earth was just dirt," she said softly. "Just something to plant on. Walk over. But here." She looked out at the wind-carved stone, at the way shadows clung like old spirits. "It's alive." Tacoma nodded. "It remembers everything." He pointed to a patch of blackened stone. "That burn mark? A raid. Before I was born. My uncle died there." He pointed again. "That mark in the wall? Rain did that. Took 20 winters." Then he pointed to the fire below. "That's us. Tonight." "Tomorrow?" she asked. He looked at her. "Depends what we leave behind." Later that night, Hannah couldn't sleep. Eli and Miriam curled against her like pups, warm and peaceful. But her eyes refused to close. So she crept outside the hide tent, knife in hand. Tacoma stood near the mouth of the canyon, eyes fixed on the stars. "They'll come tomorrow," he said without turning. "You sure?" He nodded. "Scouts near the river again. Same tracks." Hannah's fingers tightened on the knife. "Do we fight?" He finally looked at her. "Would you?" She didn't answer immediately. "I never killed anything before," she said. Then quieter. "But I've died a few times. Doesn't leave much left to lose." He studied her face. Not the bruises, not the cracks, but what remained between them. "You have more now," he said. "That's why it's harder." She stepped closer, until their breath mingled in the cold. "If I fight," she said, "I'm not doing it for revenge." He nodded slowly. "For the fire." She nodded back. "For the fire." The next day came quiet. Too quiet. Birds didn't chirp. No wind. Just stillness. Then the scent of smoke. The Comanche braves were already mounted. Tacoma barked orders, low and fast, and the others scattered like sparks. Hannah lifted her children, heart thudding, and tucked them deep into the crevice of a stone hollow lined with furs and moss. She pressed her forehead to theirs. "Stay quiet," she whispered. "No matter what. You don't move till I come." "Mama," Miriam asked, eyes wide. "I'll come. I swear." She kissed their foreheads and turned to the mouth of the canyon, knife clenched. Tacoma waited. He handed her a bow. "You won't have to use it," he said. "But if you do, aim low." She nodded, taking the weapon. From the canyon walls above, Comanche scouts waited, bows knocked. Then came the sound. Boots. Spurs. English voices. "Spread out." Amos barked from the brush. "The witch's down here somewhere." Hannah's jaw clenched. The posse moved in slowly. 8 men, all with rifles, beards dusted with cold. Some younger, some worn. All mean-eyed. Then Amos appeared. He carried a double-barreled shotgun and the look of a man who thought he was God's own judge. "Bring her out," he bellowed into the canyon. "I'll make it quick if she comes." No one moved. "Last chance, witch." Hannah stepped into view. She didn't tremble. She didn't hide. She stood on the canyon ledge, back straight, blade glinting in one hand, bow in the other. "You want me, Amos," she called. "Then come and bleed for it." He blinked. "She speaks now," he sneered. "Should have gagged you when we had the chance." He raised his gun. But before the trigger squeezed, an arrow sliced past his cheek. Tacoma's voice rang out behind her. Sharp. Commanding. The fight began. Gunfire cracked like thunder. Comanche arrows sang through the air, striking shoulders, legs, knocking men from horses. Hannah dropped low, heart hammering, arrow knocked but not loosed. A settler rushed the ledge, rifle up. She fired. Missed. Tacoma tackled the man before he could shoot again. The 2 men tumbled down the stone, fists flying. Another settler reached for her. She screamed, spun, and slashed his arm. He backed away, bleeding. Someone else shouted. Another arrow flew. The chaos blurred. Then she saw him, Amos, charging toward the hollow where the children were hidden. No. She ran, stumbling, slipping on stone. He was nearly there, gun raised. She threw the knife. It struck his shoulder. He dropped the gun, howling. She reached him in 3 strides. He turned, sneering. "You gonna kill me now?" She punched him. He staggered. She grabbed his collar, slammed him to the wall. "This is for your brother," she hissed. "And for my children." He tried to grab her throat. She brought her knee up hard. He crumpled, but not dead. He grabbed her ankle. She kicked, hard, again and again, until he stopped moving. She stood over him, chest heaving. Then hands grabbed hers. Tacoma. He pulled her back as another shot cracked above. The settlers were retreating, limping, bleeding, half their men down. The canyon held. The children cried from the hollow, but they were safe. It was over. For now. Night fell slowly. The fire burned low. Hannah sat beside Tacoma near the water's edge. The twins curled together behind them. She wiped blood from her knuckles. He handed her a scrap of cloth. "I thought I couldn't," she whispered. "But I did." He nodded. "You lived." She looked at him. "So did you." Their eyes held. Then she leaned her head against his shoulder. For the first time, he didn't pull away. They watched the fire flicker, and the canyon whispered around them. The land had seen battles, blood, loss. But tonight, it remembered her. Not as a widow, not as a witch, but as a woman who'd fought back. The snow fell again in the night, soft, heavy, and slow, like the land itself was trying to cleanse the blood from its surface. The canyon had grown quiet after the storm, its red stone slick and glistening in the pale morning light. Smoke curled from the dying fires, and the breath of the living mixed with that of the earth. Hannah stood alone on the ridge. Below her, the tribe moved silently, tending wounds, burying the dead, packing slowly. The bodies of 2 Comanche warriors lay under hides, one of them a boy no older than 16. He died with his blade still clenched. There were no tears at his burial, only chants low and steady, ancient as dust. She watched with dry eyes, heart heavy but not breaking. Not anymore. The breaking had already been done, and from its ruins, something else had started to form. Behind her, Tacoma approached without sound. "You should rest," he said softly. She didn't look at him. "I did." "Eat, then." "I'm not hungry." "You will be. You need strength." She turned, finally, meeting his gaze. His left cheek was cut, stitched by Nahi's steady hand, and bruising darkened one eye. But he stood straight, alive, whole. "More men will come," she said. "Yes," he replied. "Always more. They won't stop." "No." She paused. "Then what do we do?" He looked past her toward the distant trees, the world beyond the canyon. "We make it so they can't come back." She nodded slowly. "You mean war?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. She glanced back at the children, sleeping still in the shelter of stone and hide. Eli had curled around his sister during the night. Miriam's hand clutched the wooden horse Tacoma had carved. They looked peaceful. Too peaceful for the firestorm she knew was coming. "We could leave," she said, almost to herself. Tacoma looked at her sharply. "You want to run?" "No," she exhaled. "But I've spent most of my life surviving. Now I want to live. You will have to fight for it." "I know," she said. "And I will." The posse returned 3 days later, larger, angrier, more armed than before. This time, they didn't shout. They crept. But the land gave them away. Tacoma's brother spotted the first scout. Then 2 more were seen near the southern trail. Footprints in the snow, brittle branches cracked where no deer had passed. They were coming. Tacoma gathered the warriors beneath the canyon's highest ridge. Hannah stood with them, a bow slung across her chest, her blade tucked against her side. She wore a coat stitched from patched hide and lined with fur, her hair braided tight, her face bare. The wind stung her cheeks, but she didn't flinch. "We don't wait this time," Tacoma said. "We lead them where the ground swallows men." She glanced at him. "A trap." He nodded. The others murmured in agreement. She listened, absorbed every word. The place they chose was a hollow where the canyon wall bent inward like a broken jaw, narrow enough to bottleneck riders, sharp enough to echo every footstep. The Comanche scattered dried brush and soaked it in oil. They set up stones where they could fire from above. Hannah helped lay the bait, hoofprints, torn fabric, a bloody shawl left hanging from a tree. By dusk, the trap was set. The children had been sent ahead with Nahi and 2 others, hidden deep in the trees near the river bend. Hannah watched them go, her heart twisting, but her grip never wavering. "If I don't come back," she told Nahi, "tell them I burned for them." Nahi had simply touched her cheek and whispered, "Then they will carry your fire." The enemy came just after moonrise. Their torches moved like fireflies, too loud, too confident. Amos rode in front again, face healed but scarred now, one eye swollen from their last encounter. He didn't look like a preacher anymore. He looked like something hollowed out. "I smell her," he sneered. "She's here. Filthy whore." Hannah crouched behind a boulder, bow ready, hands steady. Tacoma signaled. The flames ignited. Brush exploded into fire as the Comanche rained arrows from above. Horses screamed. Men shouted. Smoke filled the hollow like a lungful of rage. Hannah stood, loosed her arrow. It struck a rider in the thigh. He fell, howling. Another arrow. Another man down. Amos shouted, "Find her." She stepped into the torchlight, eyes hard. "I'm here." He turned. Their eyes locked across the chaos. She dropped the bow, drew her blade. He charged. She didn't run. They collided near the fire. He knocked the knife from her hand. She slammed her head into his chin. He reeled, cursed, swung at her. She ducked, grabbed his gun. They struggled. Firelight flickered across sweat and ash. "You think you can undo what you are?" he hissed. "I already did." She pulled the trigger. The sound cracked across the stone like judgment. He dropped. She stood over him. Tacoma approached, blood on his sleeve, breath hard. "It's done," she whispered. He looked at her, not the blood, not the smoke, but her. "You still burn," he said. "I know." The Comanche gathered the next morning. The air was clean again. Smoke had cleared. The bodies were burned in a pyre near the river, where the ashes could feed the trees. Hannah stood among them, her children at her side, Tacoma at her back. No one spoke. They didn't need to. The land had changed, and so had she. Weeks passed. Spring crept in slow, cautious. Green touched the canyon walls. The tribe rebuilt further west, near water, near trees that grew tall and safe. Hannah helped raise shelters, gathered roots, stitched clothes. Her children played with Comanche boys, their laughter no longer brittle. One evening, Tacoma took her hand beneath the stars. "Will you stay?" She didn't hesitate. "Yes. You are not of my people. I wasn't of theirs either." He touched her face. "You don't have to keep burning." She smiled. "I want to. Just slower now." They stood like that, in the hush between seasons, between stories. And the narrator's voice might have said, "She was chained once, by blood, by men, by the cold. But the land didn't bury her. It remembered her. Where her blood touched the snow, something grew. And from that bloom, a fire took root. Not the kind that destroys. The kind that warms. That protects. The kind that never goes out."